But what if your character doesn't have many safe moves? Can you still play safely? And if so, how do you go about playing the character safely? Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. My name is Ultima Ivanov and I hope you're doing well. Today's video is very interesting to me, at least, because I would like to talk about an aspect that I hope is going to make you a better player, which is how to play safe, specifically in Dead or Alive 6 or Dead or Alive games in general. So I'm very fond of this topic and I did try to do some research on it, but unfortunately I really could not find a great deal of information online, let alone for Dead or Alive. So I thought, why not make a video where I give you my personal opinion or what I think it means to play safe in Dead or Alive. So oftentimes you hear commentators saying this player plays very safely, he doesn't take many risks, or he plays very solid. But what do they actually mean by that? The first thing you probably think about when it comes to playing safely is using safe moves. So you would probably think, well, in order to play safe, you only have to use safe moves. But what if your character doesn't have many safe moves? Can you still play safely? And if so, how do you go about playing the character safely? So let's try getting into that and let's see what it means to play safely in Dead or Alive. So first of all, I would definitely agree that using safe moves is a big part of playing a character safely. If your character happens to have a lot of safe moves and they are also useful moves, I would definitely encourage you to use these moves as part of your gameplay. So just as a reminder, in Dead or Alive, safe moves are those moves that when blocked, they cannot be throw punished with a guaranteed throw. So what it means is that all moves that are -5 or less on block, they are considered safe against the vast majority of the cast, whereas against grapplers, only moves that are -4 or less are considered safe, because grapplers have a neutral throw which is 4 frames fast. Therefore, if a move is -5, they can actually punish you with a neutral throw, which however can be broken. So it means they don't get guaranteed damage essentially. So moves that are -5, they essentially become semi-safe against grapplers. I made a video about punishing, which I really encourage you to check it out because it goes into a lot of detail in terms of like safe moves, semi-safe moves, grappler characters, etc. So do feel free to check that out as well. So going back to playing safely. As I said, using safe moves is definitely a good idea. So for example, if you take Zhang-Li's 6-6K, which is forward kick, that is a kind of staple move for Zhang-Li. It's a safe kick, which is -3 on block. It's basically a free attack in a sense, because if you use safe attacks, the opponent cannot throw punish you, and all you lose is your turn to attack, because you would then be at disadvantage. In case of Zhang-Li's 60k, you would be at -3, so you lose your turn to attack, and it's then time to defend. However, this is only true if you perform a fuzzy guard after the opponent has blocked one of your safe moves, because if you don't, the opponent can still throw punish you if you stop attacking. Obviously, if you do continue your offense, which I don't recommend that you do because you are at disadvantage, the opponent can throw punish you. But if you do a fuzzy guard, you will be able to basically go under their throw, so their throw would whiff, and then you are at advantage essentially. So if you want to learn more about fuzzy guarding, again, I made a video about this. Actually, that was my very first video ever on YouTube, so I really encourage you to check that out as well. So, safe moves are a big part of playing safe, especially when the last hit of a string is a safe move. In that case, you can basically decide to finish a string, trying to catch the opponent perhaps off guard just before the very last hit. And then if they block the last hit, it's not a big deal because it's actually a safe move. So again, they cannot throw punish you. So if your character happens to have a lot of safe strings when, for example, the last hit is safe, you don't really take many risks by finishing the string. But I will get back on this aspect later on when it comes to sort of string manipulation, string delaying, etc. Because if you do tend to finish strings just because the last hit is safe, and the opponent knows that you basically have this sort of habit, then they can actually hold you. So in a sense, you start playing less safely because you made yourself predictable. And making yourself unpredictable is a huge aspect, in my opinion, of playing safe. So, what if your character doesn't have many safe moves, or sort of moves that are very useful, like for example to whiff punish, which are not safe? How do you still play safely? So this is where the second aspect comes into play, which in my view, it basically comes down to sort of delaying strings and conditioning in a sense. So when it comes to conditioning, you might think, how do I condition my opponent? But this is the thing, you basically condition your opponent without even knowing that you are actually doing. Just by playing normally, you are conditioning your opponent because you are sort of creating an expectation in them to, for example, if you have a habit of finishing strings and you do so every single time, that is basically conditioning because your opponent is going to be afraid of pushing a button before the string is finished. So if you think that, oh, how do I do that? It's actually a lot easier than you think because you just do it naturally. But it's always good to do it with purpose as opposed to without thinking. So you definitely want to have a strategy when it comes to strings delaying. And strings delaying is a huge aspect in general in DOA, not necessarily linked to playing safely. I always encourage you to delay strings in DOA because if you delay strings, your opponent is always kind of on their toes because they're just never sure whether the next attack is going to basically come out or not. So go into practice and try to get a feel for how much you can delay the next attack of the string by. And by doing so, you will basically make sure that the opponent is always sort of uncertain whether it's actually their turn to attack. So for example, I play Christy in Dead or Alive and her punch-punch string is extremely delayable. Every single hit of that string is delayable. And if you get to the fourth punch, that's where the opponent is actually in trouble because there's a very dangerous mix-up there between a mid-punch and a low punch, for example, which tracks and stuns on normal hit. So if I decide to delay that very last punch, the opponent is going to basically have to respect the follow-up. And that will basically give me an advantage because what it means is that I can decide not to finish the string and start another string instead. So what it means, I essentially cancelled the last hit, which would put me in theory at disadvantage, but because the opponent has this expectation perhaps of the last hit coming and they're afraid to attack, they won't. So you basically have another free ticket for another turn. So string delaying is extremely important when it comes to playing safe, and it's definitely worth exploring the exact timing in training. There is an option to actually see how much you can delay a string by, but realistically, the only way to sort of master this ability is just to practice in training, just get a feel for how much you can delay every hit of a string by. So the other aspect of playing safe, in my opinion, is to use moves that have a lot of pushback on block. There are certain moves in the game that have a lot of pushback on block, although they are actually unsafe moves, so they are, in theory, throw punishable. But because of the pushback on block, they are very difficult to throw punish, if not impossible. For example, Christie's 7K or up-back kick is a move that has a lot of pushback on block. I believe it's -5 on block. But the only real way for the opponent to punish this move is to strike punish. And even then, they need to use a specific attack to punish that move. There are a lot of other examples. Ayane is a particular really good kick that has a lot of pushback on block. And probably the most famous move or string in Dead or Alive is Kasumi's forward punch kick, where the second kick tracks and is a mid kick that has considerable pushback on block, and it also has 2 follow-ups. So it's a really good string to use in any circumstance. Another aspect, although minor, of playing safe, in my view, is to use moves, especially when it comes to wake-up kick situations, to use moves that tend to crush lows. or they put you in a sort of airborne state. So what I mean by this is, for example, if you take Christie's 7K, this is a mid kick that crushes lows. So if the opponent wakes up with a low kick, you practically score a punish. Whereas if the opponent chooses to wake up with a mid kick, you will get knocked down. So it will be on the floor. You will have taken some damage. So obviously you have taken some risk, but it's a very minor risk because you will be on the ground and then it will be your turn to get up with a wake up kick or not. So the situation gets reversed in that case. There are many examples of moves that can be used in these situations to minimize risk. So go into training and see which moves your character has that have this sort of property. And obviously the best choice when the opponent is on the ground is actually to back up, create some space between you and your opponent in order for their kicks to whiff if they actually decide to use one, so that you can whiff punish. And whiff punishing is an excellent way of playing safe. I also made a video about this a while ago, about what it means, how to do it properly, and it's all about spacing. And this is the last point I want to mention. Spacing is probably the most important skill you can possibly have in DOA, in my view, and probably many other fighting games. It could basically be defined as the sort of distance you create between yourself and the opponent, which is not to be confused with positioning. Positioning is more where you are on the stage, whereas spacing doesn't depend on the stage or where you are on the stage. It's purely the distance that you keep with your opponent. And having good spacing means that you keep the opponent at a certain distance, which to them could seem like a random distance, but in reality you always keep them in check, so that as soon as they whiff an attack, then you are ready to basically strike punish them or whiff punish them. So it's like keeping your opponent at a certain distance, at a certain range, that your attack will always connect as soon as the opportunity to attack arises. So you play safe when you keep a certain distance from the opponent and you are able to strike punish them or whiff punish them as soon as you have an opportunity. And obviously, in order to achieve a good spacing, you really have to master movement in DOA, which is something not that difficult to do. Certainly not as difficult as it is in Tekken, because in DOA you can just simply tap back twice and hold it to basically go back quite fast, or you can use a backdash as well, which is just as efficient, if not more, for certain characters at least. So spacing is another skill that I really encourage you to develop in Dead or Alive, because it's great in so many situations. And as I said earlier, especially in wake-up kick situations, the best choice is always to back up, create some space with your opponent, let their kicks whiff, and then be ready to whiff punish. So guys, I didn't want to make this video extremely long, also because in my view, these are the main elements when it comes to playing safely. I'm really curious to know your opinion on this, because as I said, I did try to do some research on this topic. I couldn't find a great deal of information online, which was a bit disappointing. If you can think of any other things, I would encourage you to just leave a comment, and I'll definitely read and respond. So I really hope you enjoyed this video and you find it useful. I wish you a really nice rest of the day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.